I was midway through a 12-hour road trip alone, driving all my college apartment stuff back to my parents' house. The car was totally overpacked with boxes, a bike, keyboard, and the like. I was very low on gas, so I pulled over to a gas station in the middle of Nowhere Town, Georgia. The sun was dipping low, and the gas station was empty, just off the side of the main road intersecting the highway. A few cars meandered past on that road, but otherwise it was a quiet town. As I was pumping gas, a scraggly, thin guy walked up and started mumbling, asking for the time. I told him the time and made small talk, but not a word this man said was intelligible. All the while, he was circling the car and commenting on my stuff, but again, I couldn't really understand his words too clearly. I made an excuse to duck into the convenience store, which I needed to do anyways. My bike was rattling loose, and I wanted a bungee cable to affix it more securely. As I went into the store and searched for a cable, I noticed the scraggly man had also entered, and was now talking with the clerk of the store. On a scale of 1 to meth, the scraggly man was like an 8.5, but she was hardly a 5 on that scale. Much more trustworthy, while something about that guy gave me the creeps. Anyways, I found my cable, and as I approached the register, she made small talk about noting my car overpacked, and asked if I was moving somewhere. She asked about the cable, and I explained it was to secure my bike more firmly. She then told me I should drive my car behind the gas station, and that they'll help me tie it up tight, speaking in the plural, implying what I kinda already deduced. She and the man were associates somehow. Again, my car was just outside the window of the shop, in clear view of the main road. She told me I should drive it behind the building where nobody could see it for them to help tie it up, as though that help couldn't be done in the normal refueling area. At this point, my GTFO meter was maxing out at 3.4 Rontgen, so I thanked her but told her I'd be okay. And then I practically jogged to my car and got in, locking the doors immediately. As I left, I watched through the window as the woman and man were in a very animated conversation, gesticulating towards my fleeing vehicle. Could I have been paranoidly misreading these people because they kinda looked like meth heads? Sure. But making an offer that sketchy is not a very normal thing to do. When I was in the 3rd grade, my family and I moved out of state for my dad's job. I started at a new elementary school and made fast friends with a girl I'll call Maria. The two of us were inseparable, but her hobbies were something I wasn't used to. This was about 2012, and a big thing she loved was gore. Not just any scary movie gore, but My Little Pony gore. Really introduced me to a very dark side of the internet for an 11-year-old girl. She kept a binder full of these gory images and often showed them to me on the bus. First red flag. Second red flag, the boyfriend. Being a literal child at the time, I didn't understand the sudden interest of dating for my peers. But Maria had a boyfriend. It was your typical elementary school relationship, giggling at just holding hands. And it was as short-lived as any elementary school relationship, with him breaking up with her without a care in the world. But she did not take this well. She gathered our little crew in the playground, me her right-hand man. She laid out the plan. We were to chase the boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend I guess, catch him, hold him down, and she would beat him up I guess? We all didn't want to do this obviously, but she zeroed in on me. I was her best friend. I was supposed to do this for her. Being the stupid 11-year-old I was, I told her she was acting insane and I was gonna go play with the boys. From that point on, we weren't best friends. She was my bully. She harassed me endlessly, little texts constantly popping up on my flip phone, calling me names on the bus, telling authority figures that I had started it. Eventually, this accumulated into a sit-down with the principal, where we both were scolded and told to play nice. For a bit, everything was calm. Then the art room scissors started going missing. Red flag number 3. I had been chatting with a friend on the bus when Maria had put a pair of scissors very close to my neck. She laughed it off, and I stayed quiet, just wanting to keep some sort of peace at school. I knew she had stolen them, never understood why I never said anything. Things were quiet for a while again, but one day, a day that still haunts me, a day that's put up barriers in me that I shouldn't have had at a young age. I was taking my usual bus route, arriving early and taking a seat near the back. Maria arrives, sitting by herself on the opposite side near to the front. We took off and began the ride to school. As we were nearing the elementary school, mine and Maria's eyes locked. I'll never forget that smile. She proceeded to pull a kitchen knife from her bag, one of the big ones from a knife block. She flashed it at me, before zipping the bag as the bus came to a stop. I remember sitting in my seat as everyone piled off the bus. I don't remember much after that. I remember freaking out in front of the school, sitting in the office all day. I remember talking to men in uniforms, reading something that I probably shouldn't have. She was planning to hurt me, and the boy who broke up with her. She was suspended for the rest of the year. I moved before she came back, and never saw her again. When my cousin was a teenager, maybe 18 or 19, she and her friends went out to party a lot. In my country, you can legally start drinking at 16, so most teenagers start going to clubs at 16. Back then, hitchhiking was still pretty common, and most teenagers did it to get home or to the city, since only very few had cars of their own. So my cousin and her friend went to go home after a night out, and got picked up by a middle-aged guy. He was nice enough, and they made small talk while they drove. Suddenly, he took a turn onto a remote road leading into the woods. He locked the car from the inside, and his friendly facade fell. Instead, he was suddenly tense, quiet, and determined. My cousin's friend started crying quietly, but my cousin stayed calm and started talking to the man. She told him about her family, her mom and dad, her brother and sister, and asked if he also had a family. When he told her that he had a wife and 2 children, she asked for their names and how old they were, which school they went to, what their hobbies were, all while he drove them deeper into the woods. It must have triggered something, because after talking with him for a couple of minutes, he stopped the car and broke down. He started crying and told them that things weren't going well at home, that his marriage was pretty bad and he feared he'd lose his kids. My cousin comforted him during his breakdown and let him spill his heart out. Eventually, he started the car again, turned around and drove them home, saying he was sorry. They got out once they reached the street my cousin lived on, and as he drove off, my cousin saw him put a knife on the passenger seat that he had kept hidden next to him. They never hitchhiked again. I've had 2 things happen to me while I was an overnight baker in a downtown area. First, parking overnights is free in this downtown area, but it can be crowded. First come, first served. This one night I had to park a block away, and as I was walking to my job, this young guy came riding his bike around me and my car. He followed me pretty close to my job, and I was able to quickly get in the building. That morning, when my boss came in at around 4 a.m., He told me about his weird experience of this kid on a bike riding around him in his car. That guy did this for a few days until the weekend, getting closer each time. The last time he tried to hit my boss with his bike, but he managed to hop between two vehicles and walk away safely. After that, we never saw the guy again. Secondly, in the summer I would sit outside on a well-lit and busy side street. On the opposite side was a federal building with nothing between us. So this one night I'm relaxing, and I look towards the federal building and see a person completely in shadow walking my way. Even walking under the streetlights, I couldn't see the features of this person. I quickly went inside and waited from a somewhat hidden position to see who would pass. In the next 10 minutes, no one passed at all. I've never felt such malevolence from a person who was just walking. It still bothers me 15 years later. My ex-neighbors. I grew up next to them for most of my childhood. They were always strange, and in fact, we moved neighborhoods to distance ourselves from them, but they ended up purchasing the home right next to us. They had a son I'll call Daniel. Daniel was always a strange boy. When he was around 3 years old, he threw a temper tantrum that ended in him threatening to cut his mom into pieces and bury her in the yard so no one would find her. This family was mega conservative and never allowed their kids to watch TV, so it was unclear where Daniel picked up that sort of talk. As Daniel got older, he only got more strange. We'd hear screaming coming from outside and look out to see him with his younger brother in a headlock, or throwing rocks at him. And then one day, my parents were at home by themselves when they heard the front door jiggle. They went upstairs to the door and looked through the peephole and saw Daniel, wide-eyed and snarling as he frantically tried to get in our house. He tried every door and window. And that was not the last time he was seen on our property. My sister looked down from her window one night and saw him standing there, staring up into her room with a blank expression. She made sure the doors were locked and shut her blinds. One time I came home and saw that he had backed my dog into a corner. When he saw us pull into the driveway, he bolted back to his house. It wasn't long after that I noticed our animals were disappearing. We moved shortly after, but thinking about Daniel still gives me the chills. A guy approached me in the park when I was 15. He had a backpack, ginger hair, and very strange eyes, and he seemed to have come from nowhere. I had to stop because he just jumped right out in front of me. He started asking me strange questions while moving his head to hold my gaze. It's hard to explain. I was afraid and kept looking down, and he was ducking a little so he'd be at eye level with me, like you do with a child. He was giving me this big, fake, friendly smile. He asked me where the lake was, and we could see it from where we were standing. I pointed at it and went to walk off. He took off the backpack and started quickly following me, shouting questions at me. He wanted to know my name, where I lived. I took off, shouting, "Sorry, I'm busy," and I could hear him getting closer behind me. At this point, my rather scary-looking friend who I was going to meet had noticed us and came running down the path. The guy took off. My friend said he'd got a feeling that I was in trouble and walked down the grass to see if he could see me. My cousin. She was one of those kids who adults loved, but who was constantly doing cruel things to other children for no reason. Extremely manipulative. She She left me alone because my father was her mother's favorite older brother, but everyone else was fair game. I remember once we played Bloody Mary in the school bathroom. When the lights went out, one girl started absolutely shrieking. When the lights were flipped back on, she had these ragged, deep, bloody scratches down her arms and face. Of course, all the girls thought it was Bloody Mary, but I remember looking at my cousin, who was usually talkative. She was silent, but had this weird grin on her face. She was the only one of us who had long nails. What scares me the most about her is that, last I heard, she was back in grad school, in the process of becoming a psychiatrist. The thought of someone who derived so much pleasure from inflicting pain, and who was able to manipulate adults so well as a child that she was able to mask her behavior, working in that kind of position in the mental health field, terrifies me. I lived in a trailer park for a couple of years, and one night I was sitting up in bed facing the window watching TV on my phone. I happened to look up as I saw a shadow walking between mine and my neighbor's yard. It was really late at night and knew no one would be outside at that time. I texted my neighbor telling her about it and asked if she had seen anything. A few nights later, me and a couple of neighborhood women were walking down the little road in the trailer park when we started to hear twigs and branches snapping. It stopped when we stopped walking, and continued if we took a step. Since it was dark, we couldn't see across the road to know what it was. Freaked us out a bit. Then things got really weird. Stuff outside would go missing, and on some nights a fire could be seen across the road. It was over by a creek near a big cave on the mountainside. Whenever someone would loudly say they could see a fire, within minutes it would be out. We all thought a hobo was living in the cave and was possibly harmless. But that changed when two guys were walking the trailer park late at night and came across a man trying to break in my windows. From what the guys told the police, the strange man was standing outside my kid's bedroom window, trying to lift it up. When they screamed at him, he took off running for the mountain. Police searched around the trailer park and under a few trailers, where they found a makeshift bed, a bucket, and a flashlight under my neighbor's trailer. I'm 21 and female. I was in a store picking up some items for my house when I noticed a man was literally peeking at me from around a corner. I first brushed it off and continued my shopping, but was aware that this man was following me around the store. He then sang out to me and said I looked familiar and asked if I went to the local university. I didn't, so I said no. At this point I got creeped out, so I checked out and went to my car. I heard footsteps behind me and knew he had followed me, so I just jumped in my car and locked the doors. It was dark, so I hadn't noticed him go around the back of my car until he banged on my passenger window. I ignored him and started the car. This prompted him to run around the front and start banging on my driver's side door, trying to open it and asking for a ride. I was terrified and just pulled out of the parking space as fast as I could and drove off, with him chasing my car until I rounded a corner. I have no idea what his plan was, but to this day I'm nervous about parking lots at night. This one really sticks out to me as I haven't had any really scary encounters. Most just made me uncomfortable. This one scared me in a different way. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we were walking with our two friends who were sisters. We were in our late 20s, walking around an outlet mall. I was about 10 feet behind the three of them, so to anyone else, it probably didn't look like I was with them. They walked past a bench, and sitting on it was a white guy in a long black coat, and no other real discernible features. For whatever reason, I specifically noticed him as they were approaching, so I was watching him the entire time. The instant he was out of eyesight of the girls, he holds up a police badge, but kept it very close to his body, like he was hiding the fact that he was showing it. He faced it towards them and followed them with it the entire time. He put it down after they were about 5 feet away. I'm not sure if he stopped because he noticed me or what. I know this doesn't sound scary at all, but all I could think was, this dude is building up the courage to pretend he's a police officer to women. He's gonna hurt someone someday. I'm not sure if I got bad vibes from him prior to that, or I'm misremembering when I got those vibes, but it seriously creeped me out. I was in high school and worked at a truck stop. One night, a trucker came in and stared at me for a long time. Whenever I moved, he was staring me down. I told him that if he needed anything, he would need to come to the counter and order it. He just grunted and kept staring. I'm not a small person, and at that time I was in football, wrestling, and track. I was also at the gym 6 days a week. I was 190 pounds of muscle and teenage hormones, but the vibes I got from this guy were making me nervous. I called up my other coworker and told them I was going to be in the freezer for a while, so I was stocking the freezers and coolers for a while, then went to the bathroom. As I entered the bathroom, the trucker jumped up and walked in behind me, and just stood there while I took a piss and washed my hands. As soon as I got out, I grabbed the trash bags and beelined outside to take care of the trash at the pumps until he left. After I finally came in, my coworker asked me why the trucker kept following me. I had no idea why. He never said anything, didn't order anything, just filled up his semi and creeped on me. I've never been as creeped out by a person as I was with that guy. When my daughter turned 1, we went on a trip to Hawaii. When first we were sitting in the airport waiting to check in for our tickets, a man approached me and started commenting on how beautiful my daughter was. Fine, thanks, but it didn't stop there. He stood over me and continued to try and touch her, and ask about her age, birthday, favorite things, where we were going. I refused to answer, but he refused to move, and we were trapped. My husband came back and the man stepped away pretty quick. I told airport security, but they didn't do anything. We got to our gate and a few minutes later, the same man sat and positioned himself where he could watch our daughter. If we moved seats, he kept her in his sight. I mentioned it to the gate agent, who brushed it off again. We got on the plane and he managed to also be on the plane in a seat where he could keep an eye on her. He kept smiling at her and getting up to walk the aisles and pass her. My husband got up at one point, and he came over and said in baby talk, "I found out where you're going, didn't I?" I reported it to the flight attendant, who thankfully was not messing around. He was forced to switch seats and was not allowed to get up again. Upon landing, there were people waiting for him that he was forced to go with. Security or airport staff, I don't know, but we didn't see him again. That was 2 years ago, and I still remember how terrified I was. I was a teenage girl who decided to take a bus to see my boyfriend downtown. It was winter, and the snow slowed me down a bit, and I missed the bus. So I had no other choice but to wait for the next one. Right after I missed it, a man pulled right up and asked if I needed a ride. It was freezing, so I accepted his offer, just to take me to the next stop down the road. He was around 30. Nice car, blue, kind of buggy eyes, but overall well-dressed and friendly enough. After I got in the car, I realized my mistake, as he passed the stop and insisted that he take me downtown himself. I kept refusing as politely as possible, and told him if he'd let me out I could just walk back to the bus stop. As I was trying to convince him, he kept insisting, and began rambling and talking faster and faster about how he's a nice person and I should trust him. At this point, I was terrified. I started to open the door while he was driving, which caused him to yell at me, but mid-scream he switched, like a light, and calmed down, asking me if I was hungry, maybe in an attempt to seem normal. So I told him that yes, I had to use the bathroom very badly, so he swung around to a Steak and Shake parking lot, at which point I bolted from the car and into the restaurant, and tried to explain as quickly as possible to the waiter, while the man parked and strolled in. They quickly told me to hide in the bathroom, which I did for close to 40 minutes, before the waiter came in to tell me that the man had finally left. I felt like a huge idiot, and never accepted a ride from anyone ever again.